Good morning, everybody. And today we are going to continue the discussion of our last part, that is the diagnosis in orthodontics. Our HOD sir has been taking the last two units, that is diagnosis in orthodontics part 1 and part 2. Now we are going to have a part 3. So we have seen how to do a diagnosis in orthodontics. First we have seen the general health. First it includes an interview part where you ask some questions and you derive the answers from the patient. Next part is that you start observing the patient. So you know what is the symmetry of the patient, how the profile of the patients looks. Now we will move on to what is called as the divergence. What is the term by name divergence means? Divergence is nothing but trying to establish a connection between our forehead and the chin. So it indicates the position of the chin or the mandible to say in relation to the chin. Whereas in profile, we try to relate Nasion, point A, and the Pogon, and 3 points we have taken in profiles. So in profiles, we cannot clearly say where is the problem is. It may be due to a prognathic maxilla or it may be due to a retrognathic mandible in a case of convex profile. So to point out whether this problem is due to the mandible or not, we will go what is called as divergence. So divergence is defined as the anterior posterior inclination of the lower face in relation to the forehead. You are not including the maxilla. So if it slopes, if your mandible or the chin point slopes backwards, it is called as backwardly positioned or posterior divergent. Normally, we'll have a straight profile between Nasion, point A and Pogonion. This is called as orthognathic divergence. If it slopes anteriorly, you call it as anterior divergent. So, posterior divergent are seen when the mandible is backwards. Where can you see a posteriorly positioned mandible? It is in class 2 conditions. So in a class 2 condition, you will see a posterior divergent and a convex profile usually, but both may be slightly different, which we are going to learn. But in general, a posterior divergent face is associated with an convex profile and a class 2 mandible, that means retrognathic mandible. No need to explain what is the straight and orthognathic divergence. All the points lie in the same plane, and also the pogonion will be in line with the forehead. Anterior divergent. When anterior divergent conditions occur, whenever the mandible moves forwards, if the mandible has moved forward sagittally ahead of maxilla, then it gives rise to what is called as a class 3 condition, class 3 occlusion. In such cases, you find the anterior divergent mandible. So this is what are the different types of divergence we will have. We will connect a line between the forehead and the chin point, Pogonion. It should be a straight. Sometimes can you see here is blue line indicating a posterior divergent. This can also be done in second way. So once you put a Frankfurt horizontal plane and a perpendicular is dropped here. So this is a perfect 90 degrees, and you see the line joining the forehead and the chin, whether it's posterior to or anterior to this line. When posterior to the line, it is called as backward or posterior divergent to this 90 degrees. When it is forward to this 90 degrees line, it is called as anterior divergent, as already explained. So we have the average face, anti-face and retro-face depending upon its relation to the 90 degrees perpendicular or from a line drawn from the forehead to the chin point. So a backward slanting face, can you see here? The chin is less prominent. Likewise, in a forward slanting position, the chin is more prominent. You see here, anti-face chin is ahead of the 90 degrees line, whereas in retro face, the chin is backwards to this 90 degrees line, and in average face, both meet together. So here are some of the examples to show a straight profile, a posterior divergent face, and a convex profile. Can you see a convex profile and a posterior divergent face? Both of them are present in the same face. Likewise, if you take this case, it is an example of a mild concavity, concave profile. So concave profile and anteriorly divergent. So it indicates a class 3 pattern, whereas this has a class 1 pattern, where this is a clear-cut class 2 skeletal condition. Here you can see a orthognathic profile, but the line is slanting slightly little bit forward. It's orthognathic divergence to anterior divergence. Now comes the anterior-posterior jaw relationships. What we are talking about, class 1, class 2 and class 3 conditions relates to the relationship between the maxilla and mandible. Ideally, maxilla is 2 to 3 millimeters forward of the mandibular skeletal base. So this point, in all of us, we have a little bit of this point A compared to the point B or the mandibular skeletal place. So whenever you place your fingers like this, whenever you place your fingers like this, it should be a straight pointing. Whenever you try to pose between the patients like this, it should be an 90 degrees, or the horizontal portion of your hand should face, the palm should face vertically downwards. It should be a class 2 condition. When the maxilla is prognathic, so when you try to put your finger, this is the gun mechanism. Just like shoot, you put your gun like this. So this point, when it is short, it folds. Or to make it into the points, you have to put your finger like this, pointing upwards. So when you place your fingers pointing upwards, it indicates it then class 2 pattern. Likewise, when the mandible is prognathic, you have to face your fingers downwards like this. So this becomes a class 3 condition. So you will get a rough estimate of what is forward and what is backward from your profile, from your divergence, and of course from your this thing, anterior posterior jaw relationship. Now it is clear in sagittal relationship where is the problem is. Of course you have to confirm this with cephalometric diagnosis. Now we'll get an idea whether the maxilla is having the problem, or the mandible is having the problem, or it is both the conditions within maxilla and mandible the problem is. We have seen in sagittal condition. Now the diagnosis, we know that malocclusion exists in all the 3 conditions. During measuring of the symmetry of the face, you have seen that transverse dimension is correct or not in the face. Now we have seen the sagittal relationship. Now we move to the posterior relationship. So these are called as, what is called as different proportions of the face, vertical proportions. After transverse and sagittal, we move on to the vertical proportions of the face. Our face can be divided into 3 equal components. One extends from the hairline to the glabella. Glabella is the most prominent point between the 2 eyebrows, and from glabella or Nasion point to the subnasal, and from subnasal to the menton. All these 3 structures are called as the 1/3 of the face. All these should have an equal proportion. Sometimes we divide the proportions into halves, upper facial height and lower facial height. Usually the lower facial height is little bit around 10% excess compared to the upper facial height. Upper facial height, it is drawn from the glabella to the subnasal. So if you can remember, here we have drawn thirds. So the entire this thing now we are calling it as 1/3 into halves. If we divide into third, glabella to the hairline is 1/3 of the forehead. Normally we are not considering the forehead if we divide into halves. We consider from glabella to the nasion as 1/2, and from another lower point you call it as lower half of the face, where it is from subnasal to the most lowest most part of the chin, it is menton point. So the upper part of the face is called as upper facial height and the lower part is called as lower facial height. The difference should be 45 is to 55%. If the lower part is more, it indicates the mandible is going downwards and backwards. We will going to discuss what is that. So this is called as relationship between the Frankfurt mandibular plane and Frankfurt horizontal plane and a mandibular plane. What is Frankfurt horizontal plane? We know that Frankfurt horizontal plane is drawn between the skin nasion perpendicular to the orbital perpendicular. That is the lowermost point of the orbit to the uppermost point of the orbital point. This is called as Frankfurt mandibular plane. This is called as mandibular plane, the tangent to the mandibular border. So normally the angle between these two is 25 degrees, 18 to 25 degrees, and just when you draw these two lines, they will meet at the occiput point. So whenever the lower facial height is increased or the mandible rotates downwards, so what happens is this point shifts towards the mastoid region. So can you see here the shifting of the intersection point to the forward position in case if the mandible rotates backwards. If the mandible rotates backwards, the lower facial height increases. What happens if mandible is rotated forward downwards? What is happening between the maxilla and mandible? It becomes a open bite tendency. So open bite tendencies are seen when the mandible rotates downwards and backwards and when the lower facial height is increased. Usually it is seen in class 2 conditions. So coming to the opposite, what happens when lower facial height is decreased? Can you see when the lower facial height is decreased? What happens to the mandible? Mandible is rotating upwards. When the mandible rotates upwards, what is happening to the bite here? Can you see it? Bite is deepening. This gives rise to deep bite. So this is also called as clockwise and anti-clockwise rotation. So remember, an anti-clockwise rotation, a short face, a lower facial height, and a deep bite and hypodivergent. These are all known by one or the other name. And an increased lower facial height and a hypodivergent face, the clockwise rotation of the mandible, open bite tendency, or the long face, these are all referred to the long type of or the steep type of Frankfurt mandibular plane where the angle is increased. This already we have discussed how to divide the face into thirds. Law of thirds it is called. Now comes the important part is our lips and the teeth. The lips are the soft tissue component which helps in the speech deglutition and it gives beautiness or aesthetic sense to the our appearance. The teeth, they well support these lips. So whenever these teeth are proclined, the lips becomes what is called as incompetent. Likewise, the tightness or the taut of the lips keep the inclination of the incisors in a normal condition. If the lips becomes loose, there will be proclination of the incisors. So whenever there is proclination, you have to retract back the incisors. Whenever incisors are retracted back, the competence decreases. Now, how will be your relationship between your the lip and your dentition in normal condition? If you can check yourself, when you relax in a competent lips, your lower lip, it covers the incisal 1/3 of the upper incisors. See, you can see it. It covers the lower incisor of the lower incisor layer of the upper teeth. The incisal edges it covers. So it covers full of the lower teeth plus it tries to cover the upper teeth. Whenever the teeth procline, this relationship between the lips and the teeth is lost. So when do you call it as competent? Normally up to 4 to millimeter, 4 to 3, 4 millimeters of separation when the person is talking or smiling, or when the person is in relaxed position, 2 to 4 millimeters lip separation is a common finding. When the muscles are relaxed, you call it as a competent lips. When this becomes in excess, when the patient is not able to close his lips in a relaxed position, this is called as incompetent. How can it happen? When the patient is not able to close his lips, means it can happen due to a short lip, or it can happen due to a proclined upper central incisors. So when the lip is short, you call it as anatomically incompetent lips. But if the teeth are proclined and anatomically lip is normal, but still it appears to be short due to the proclined incisors, you call it as, what do you call it as? Potentially incompetent lips. Potentially incompetent means anatomically they are competent, but due to the potential problem, like incisors causing this problem, they have become incompetent. So in this case, what the patient is he tries to close the, every time he uses the force. So whenever he starts using the force, the mental becomes very active. And what is this called? When you see pseudo dearranged appearance, it is called. So it is called as puckering of the skin. This is very clearly prominent in a class 2 due to patients due to the proclination of the incisors. You can see the puckering of the skin. So this is again to repeat. So how do you know whether it is anatomically short or not, or it is due to the potentially incompetent lip? Normally, this part from the base of the nose, one line is drawn, and the commissure gives the upper incisor length. This upper incisor length should be 1/3 of the length in the lower half of the face. We know that lower half of the face is drawn from the subnasal to the point maintain. So this upper lip should be 1/3. If it is less than that, we say that is anatomically less, and it is due to anatomically incompetent lips. So and so patient is having incompetent lips. Normally, most of the cases we get is due to the proclination of the incisors, and we call it as anatomic incompetent, potentially incompetent lips. Then it is due to a short lip, you call it as anatomically incompetent lips. So this is what we call it as potentially incompetent everted lips. The lip seal is prevented by the protruding maxillary incisors. So next comes what is called as lip step. Normally, If you observe from side, you can see the lower lip is a head of upper lip. Little bit of negative lip profile will be present. So if too much of lower lip is prominent is called as positive lip step. It is seen in a class 3 condition. So it clearly indicates that the mandible has come forward in relation to the maxilla. So too much of negative step is seen in a class 2 malocclusion because the mandible is relatively located backwards. So next comes your nasolabial angle. How do you know that the lips are protruded by the incisors? By measuring the base of the nose and the labial angle. This angle, it is called as nasolabial angle. Usually it is 110 degrees. If there is proclination of incisors, this nasolabial angle gets decreased. So you can tell why the incompetent lips have developed in the patient, because it is due to an decreased nasolabial angle. The proclination of incisors resulted in decrease of nasolabial angles. Likewise, when incisors are retroclined, as in class 2 due to cases. What are class 2 due to cases? A due to cases is one in which the incisors are retroclined back. So when the incisors are retroclined back, the nasolabial angle is increased. So these are some of the conditions with competent and incompetent lip. This is how a competent lips look. Just 4 millimeters of separation there. At rest we have a perfect lip seal. And can you see the perfect lip seal from the side views or profile of the patient, side profile of the patient? Whereas can you see here incompetent lips? These incompetent lips in the patient has created a large interlabial gap. Can you see the gummy smile of the patient? And every time he started to close to conceal the showing of this proclined incisor. So it has developed what is called as everted lower lips to the hyperactive mentalis muscle. So here also potential incompetent. Normally she had normal lips, but due to the proclined incisors, the lip length appears to be short. So incompetent lips, another case of deep mentolabial sulcus. So the chin, we have seen from our analysis that the chin should be in line with the dacian, or it should be in line with the subnasal. So it should be an adequate. Man is an bipedal animal. He should have a prominent chin. The chin prominence is developed in the evolution. If you see the lower grade vertebrates or the mammals, they don't have a well-developed chin. So it is a man who has a well-developed chin. So due to the mentalis activities, when the chin is deficient, there is hyperactive mentalis muscle. Can you see the puckering of the skin and lip trap? This is called as. So every time when the patient is a very short, important answer for important question. So whenever there is proclination, too much of proclination of upper teeth is there. Every time when the patient tries to close during deglutition, so what happens is we can close like this. But the patient in whom lip trap is having, every time the patient close, he tries to close like this. That means the lip traps behind the central incisors. So what happens? Whenever the lip traps, it throws a pressure on the upper anterior. So when the lip traps in between and it throws a pressure, the proclination increases a little bit. When the proclination increases, lip trap increases. When the lip trap increases, again still the proclination increases. So this sets up a vicious circle until the balance of forces occurs. By this time, the patient might have a severely proclined upper incisors. So the patient is having lip trap and a deep mentolabial sulcus. Now, that chin prominence I was discussing about. So a prominent chin, too much of prominent chin, normally it should be in line with your forehead. This is a example of recessive chin. So your lips, nasolabial angle, proclination of the teeth, your competent and incompetent lips, chin, puckering of the skin, mentolabial sulcus, all these are related to one another. Sometimes lip incompetence increases when the lower half of the face increases. That's why you have to take a sequence of steps we have taken. Whether the lower half of the face increased or not, you have to rule out in your early examination. Now comes the intraoral examination. So intraoral examination consists of the soft tissue examination and the hard tissue examination. So from generalized view of soft tissue into a generalized view of hard tissue will go. After noticing the generalized condition of dentition, now we will try to examine closely the intra-arch relationships. So we know by Andrew 6 case of malocclusion how should be the dentition. There should be no crowding, no space. The curve of fish should be very flat. All this we have learned in our basics. The mesiobuccal cusp of the upper first molar should occlude with the mesiobuccal cusp of the lower to have a class 1 relationship. All this we will check now in the patient. So the soft tissue is a very important component. Before going to the dentition and just define what malocclusion in the patient, we should know how the soft tissues are there. The important soft tissue components are gingiva, tongue, the lip and buccal, cheek and frena. Of course, another important structure is the adenoids. These adenoids are related to us. By examination of adenoids, it gives a clue whether the patient is having a normal physiological growth or due to the swelling of the adenoids, it causes nasorespiratory problems, upper respiratory tract problems, and this may lead to what is called as mouth breathing habit and concurrent changes associated with it, like incompetent lips and mouth breathing, smelling, breathing with the mouth, again inflammation, all these sets it. So you have to thoroughly examine the soft tissues. So normally how the tongue will be, if you can clearly observe your tongue lies in the trough, uyala anamata. Oka uyala totti ela untundo, tongue dan lopala untundi. It lies within the trough of the mandible. So how do you know that a patient is having a long tongue or not? You ask the patient to stretch it. Normally we cannot stretch it, but at the same time we should be able to bring out in normal conditions. Tongue comes out of the mouth, whereas in ankylosing and some conditions where the tongue is tight, it won't come out. So in conditions of hyperstretchability of the tongue, whereas that occurs in Ehlers-Danlos syndrome like that, the patient may be able to touch the tip of the tongue. Next thing is width. When it lies within the trough, when I stretch my tongue like this, I cannot find any indentations. Whereas if the width is, tongue is more, or if there is macroglossia, you can find indentations or tritinations on the tongue. Can you find here? These are called as indentations from the cusps of the posterior teeth. Likewise, what is called as restricted movements due to the lingual frenum. So it gives rise to restricted movement, tongue frenum. The tongue lies low, still low. and lippal cheek frena. Frena are very important. So you have to see the mainly the upper labial frena, heavy midline diastema, heavy frenum with fibrous thickening may give rise to what is called as midline diastema or spacing between the anterior teeth, which is a common condition with many of the patients report to us. So how do you do it? You do this by a frenum test called as hyfrenal test by pulling the frenum. If there is blanching, you will now confirm that by blanching of this frenum, this midline diastema may be confirmed due to this labial frenum. Hence, this is called as blanching test. And when you blanch it at the papilla, this papilla starts moving. When you pull your lip up, there will be blanching of the mucosa of the frenum, plus you can see this movement of incisive papilla. Then the blanching test is said to be positive. This is called as hyfrenal attachment. So in such cases, you have to cut down this frenum. This is called as frenectomy. Otherwise, the space between the upper incisors won't close. Even if closes, it won't stay for long time. It tries to come back. Sometimes, just like maxilla, mandibular also, the frenal attachments occur, which has to be released. Next comes the examination of gingiva. Usually, the gingiva will be coral pink in color. It is knife edge marginal. Sometimes you will find a heavy hyperplasia of gingiva, fibrotic gingiva, which hinders the normal eruption of the teeth. And in second mouth breathing conditions, you will find very redness, fiery redness of these marginal gingiva. Sometimes it develops due to the inflammatory conditions. Another part is, as in class 2 due to conditions, the lower tip goes and impinges on the palatal mucosa, and the upper teeth due to reticulation strips off the lower gingiva. You can see, literally you can see the stripping of the lower labial gingiva. If there is any problem, if there is any change in the labial or lingual or the palatal gingival tissues, you have to make it a note of it. Next comes the palatal depth. The palate depth is seen in many conditions associated with cleft lip and palate. Normally, this palatal depth is related to the intermolar width. So you have to calculate the molar width and palatal height. And another important aspect is the rugae. The third rugae can be seen in line with canine of the maxillary edge. It gives whether the patient is having a class 2 or a class 1 normal condition or a class 3 condition. So the inflammatory and pathological condition should also be checked. Any scar tissue in the palate indicates previously done surgeries for cleft lip and palate. Likewise, mucosal indentations, as I told, on the labial aspect of the labial gingiva of the lower or palatal aspect of the upper indicates a class 2 deep bite, D1 or D2 due to a deep bite. Now comes to the dental characteristics. So dental characteristics, you have to examine the size, the shape and number of the teeth. You have read in oral pathology all these conditions which cause the discrepancy in the size or shape or number of the teeth, aplasia or hereditary ectodermal dysplasia. All that, if the any teeth are missed, after all these characteristics you have to write, because this causes the local factors of malocclusion. When the tooth structure is lost, there occurs a discrepancy or excess of to calculate between the base which carries it, the base and the size of the teeth should closely match one another. When there is discrepancy, is called as tooth length, arch length discrepancy. TSLAD, tooth structure or length discrepancy is there. It may give rise to crowding. So you have to write down the chronology of eruption also, whether the teeth has erupted properly, and chronology of their exfoliation also you have to note down, whether the teeth has stayed more time in the oral cavity. If the teeth has more in the oral cavity, the primary teeth, the erupting permanent teeth may erupt in crowding. So next is apical base. Apical base is nothing but the alveolar bone housing of the teeth. So it is drawn by tangents to the posterior teeth. So the teeth should lie within the housing or the apical bone for a proper occlusion. So can you see here? Alveolar housing is there, whereas the teeth has flared buccally. If the lower teeth flares more buccally than the upper teeth, then you will have called as buccal cross bite. So if the teeth are already buccally tilted, you cannot tilt it more by expansion methods to treat a buccal cross bite. So all these things you have to note down. Now you can see broad apical base because the line tangent drawn to the posterior surface of the buccal surface and the apical base is sloping inwards. So this clearly indicates that to make this line parallel, you can expand the arch. So a carious teeth, a well retained, a well restored carious teeth, a good space maintainer. So these things you have to keep in mind. And there should be no carious teeth. It hinders the progression of the fixed orthodontic appliance therapy. Carious teeth should be looked carefully and it should be treated before the start of the treatment. The gingival disease has to be brought down because it is the periodontium that is called as bed of orthodontic tooth movements where the reactions of tooth movement occur. We are going to learn in next chapter. That's why you should not have any gingivitis. You should not have any disease related to the dentition. Carious teeth should be filled or treated before the start of treatment. Next comes the wear facets. Sometimes you can abnormal wearing of the teeth. This may be due to the bruxism or any other parafunctional habits. So as already we have discussed, the crown size and tooth ratio should have, the crowns should be very closely related to one another. They should be in a perfect line without any spacing or without any crowding. So you have seen the upper arch, you have seen the lower arch, note down the individual abnormalities. Now bring the two teeth together, maxilla and mandible. Why you are bringing? Now you are going to see what is called as interarch discrepancies. When you bring the teeth together, the midline of the upper and midline of the lower should coincide with the that of the face. You note it down whether the midlines are concordant. Not only they should coincide with the face, they should coincide with one another. In case of spacing and crowding, the midline shifts, or due to the asymmetry of the face itself, whole face itself, sometimes the midline shift to this side and that side. Now, and once you place your teeth in occlusion, you start examining the molar relationship, you start examining the canine relationship, you start examining the incisor region, what is called as overbite, which is the horizontal, which is the vertical overlap of upper incisor and lower length, and the horizontal overlap, which is called as overjet and overbite. You have to now define. So what is neutro-occlusion? Neutro-occlusion is nothing but a class 1 condition. When the mesiobuccal cusp of the upper occludes in the lower, you call it as a class 1 conditionship. So likewise, a disto-occlusion is a condition in which the mandible is distally placed or maxilla is forwardly placed. When relatively maxilla is forwardly placed, you call it as a class 2 condition or a disto-occlusal condition. Can you see here? Instead of the mesiobuccal cusp occluding here, it is occluding with the premolars. Likewise, we have a class 3 condition. So when the mandible is prognathic, so instead of the mesiobuccal cusp occluding in the mesiobuccal groove of the lower, it starts occluding in the distobuccal groove of the lower. So now we have noted down the sagittal relationship. You have noted down this transverse relationship. So come to the canine region. Same, you note down the canine relationship. Now you note down the overbite. Normally when we close like this vertically, upper incisor should overlap the lower incisors by 2 to 3 millimeters or 30 millimeters. If more than 30 millimeters of overlap is there, you call it as a deep bite condition. So can you see here, due to increased clone length, lower teeth are not seen. Usually when and 60 to 70% of the lower teeth is seen. Here it is not seen at all. Here also see, can you see? This is called as inverted overbite. Inverted overbite, because this patient is having both overjet. Instead of this direction, he is having back. Instead of upper overlapping the lower, it is overlapping from the back. This is reverse overjet plus increased overbite. It is called as inverted overbite. Remember, the upper incisor should cover the lower incisors by 30%. If it is increased more than that, you will call it as an deep bite. If there is no overlap at all, you call it as a open bite condition. Now comes the overjet, the horizontal overlap. How much the distance between the labial surface of the lower incisors and the lingual surface of the upper. This is called as overjet. It reflects, in fact, the relationship between the underlying skeletal bases. The more the incisors are proclined, it indicates in general the more the maxillary teeth are forwardly positioned. Check for the curve of Spee. Curve of Spee should be very flat. Now we check for cross bites. Normally, the upper maxillary teeth or the upper buccal cusp overlap the lower buccal cusps. So you check, can be either unilateral or bilateral, this cross bite is there. So you have to express, whenever you bring the maxilla and mandible dentition together, you should express your malocclusion in a vertical direction, in a sagittal direction, in a transverse direction. So when writing a diagnosis, you start with the angles classification, followed by if any etiology known etiology is identified during the diagnosis, and whether this is present on type of skeletal base. We have seen that how to measure a type of skeletal base and the profile of the patient, how the profile of this patient. Then start explaining the dental intra-alveolar, intra-arch malocclusion like crowding spacing, so and so teeth are so and so, and try to explain the malocclusion all the three planes. This gives a complete diagnosis of malocclusion of that patient clinically. Of course, this has to be confirmed by your other diagnostic criteria. Usually we use cephalometrics. So next important part is the functional examination. We know that functional examination, the lips, competent of the lips is checked by the deglutition test, the mouth breathing. If the patient is having mouth breathing, we have what is called as butterfly test, water swallow test, which we are going to discuss during the discussion of habits. So another important examination is TFG examination. You have to see the maximum mouth opening. You have to see the left side and right side patient is able to open only. You have to see whether there is any pain when observed intra-auricularly. You have to see the muscle tenderness and all these points you have to write. Because postural rest position you also note down during physical examination, and you have to check for nasal breathing or mouth breathing, of course, adenoids, all this come under functional examination, where there is one more class on functions of somatognatic system for you. Thank you for your kind hearing.